By day, it's just an old hallway. But when night falls, it isn't as empty as you think. They say that if you see a figure standing at the end of the corridor, don't stare too long, because the moment you're certain it's looking back at you is the moment you're no longer sure you'll leave alone. Chapter 1. The Night Shift with No One Else. Serinthorn Hospital had been abandoned for more than a decade. No official record ever stated the exact year it was shut down. People only said that after the incident, the government quietly relocated all patients, sealed several buildings, and left the rest to decay under dust, mold, and silence. The western wing was the worst. That was where the long corridor was. I was assigned my first night shift there at the beginning of the rainy season, when Bangkok felt heavier than usual, as if the air itself refused to move. My shift started at 11 p.m. and ended at 6 in the morning. Alone, no partner, no supervisor, just me, a flashlight, and a radio that barely worked once you stepped past the main lobby. The moment I entered the western wing, the smell changed. It was not the smell of rot or garbage. It was older than that, something sterile and bitter, like dried disinfectant mixed with damp concrete. The kind of smell that never truly leaves a hospital, no matter how long it has been abandoned. The corridor stretched out in front of me, unnaturally straight and narrow. Fluorescent lights hung from the ceiling, flickering at irregular intervals, casting uneven shadows that crawled along the walls. The floor tiles were cracked, some of them slightly sunken, as if the building itself was tired of standing. Every step I took echoed too clearly. My boots hit the floor, tap, 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 and a fraction of a second later, the sound came back to me, softer but unmistakably delayed, like another pair of footsteps following behind at a careful distance. I stopped. The echo stopped too. I told myself it was just acoustics. Long corridors always played tricks on sound. That was what the supervisor had said during orientation, avoiding my eyes when he mentioned the western wing. I walked on. At the far end of the corridor, something shifted. At first, I thought it was a shadow caused by the flickering lights, but then it became clearer, too defined to be just darkness. A human shape stood there, motionless, perfectly centered at the end of the hall. It did not move. It did not breathe. It simply stood there, as if waiting. I swallowed hard and called out, my voice echoing unnaturally loud in the empty space. "Is anyone there?" The figure did not answer. The lights above me flickered again. Once, twice, then the corridor plunged into complete darkness. And in that sudden, suffocating blackness, I felt it. Something was no longer standing at the end of the hall. It was closer. Chapter 2. The figure at the end of the corridor. The darkness did not last long. The emergency lights flickered back to life one by one, casting a dim red glow along the corridor. Everything looked the same as before, the cracked tiles, the peeling paint, the sagging ceiling panels, but something in the air had changed. It felt heavier, denser, as if the corridor itself had noticed me. I forced myself to look toward the end of the hall. The figure was there. It stood exactly where it had been before the lights went out. At the very edge of the corridor, half swallowed by shadow. It did not step closer. It did not retreat. It simply remained, tall and still, like a silhouette cut out of darkness and placed there on purpose. I tried to focus on details. Arms, legs, a head. Human proportions, almost normal, but slightly wrong. As if whoever it was had been stretched too thin. The edges of the figure were blurry, trembling faintly, like heat rising from asphalt. No facial features were visible, only a darker patch where a face should have been. My radio crackled at my waist. Static. I grabbed it and pressed the button, whispering into it, afraid that raising my voice might break something fragile. "Control, this is Night Watch. Is anyone on the channel?" Only static answered. The corridor seemed longer than it had been a moment ago. I was sure of it. The figure looked farther away, yet somehow clearer, as if distance did not apply to it in the same way it applied to me. I took one cautious step forward. The sound of my boot echoed, tap. And then came another sound. Not an echo. A second step. Delayed by half a second. I froze, every muscle in my body tightening. The figure at the end of the hall did not move, but the sound had come from behind me. My breath turned shallow. I did not dare to turn around. Slowly, painfully aware of every movement, I lifted my flashlight and aimed it toward the figure. The beam cut through the dim red light and landed squarely on its chest. The light passed through it. Not like smoke, not like fog. More like it was shining on something that refused to exist properly. The figure reacted for the first time. Its head tilted, just slightly. A gesture too deliberate to be imagined. And in that moment, I understood something without knowing how I knew it. The figure was not lost. It was not wandering. It was waiting. Waiting for me to notice it. Waiting for me to acknowledge that it was there. The fluorescent lights above flickered again. Faster this time, as if struggling to stay alive. Shadows crawled along the walls, stretching and shrinking, twisting into shapes that looked uncomfortably human. I took a step back. The second set of footsteps followed. Closer now. Still unseen. And somewhere deep inside my chest, beneath the fear and disbelief, a single thought surfaced, quiet, cold, and terrifyingly clear. This corridor was not empty. It had never been.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 3. The camera that recorded nothing. Morning came without relief. When my shift ended, the sky outside the hospital was already pale with dawn, but I felt no sense of completion, only exhaustion wrapped tightly around a knot of unease. I did not sleep. The image of the figure at the end of the corridor replayed in my mind every time I closed my eyes. By 8 a.m., I was in the security office. The room smelled of instant coffee and overheated electronics. Old monitors lined the wall, each labeled with black marker: lobby, parking, east wing, west wing. I sat down in front of the one marked west wing corridor, my fingers trembling slightly as I rewound the footage to the start of my shift. 11 p.m. I appeared on screen, walking into the corridor, flashlight in hand. Everything looked normal, too normal. I fast-forwarded. 11:45 p.m. Still nothing. 1:10 a.m. The moment I had seen the figure. The screen froze. Not paused, frozen. The timestamp continued to move, seconds ticking forward, but the image itself did not change. No flicker, no distortion, just a single still frame of an empty corridor. Perfectly lit, perfectly silent. I leaned closer to the monitor. My reflection stared back at me from the dark glass, pale and hollow-eyed. I skipped ahead. 1:15. 1:20. 1:30. The footage resumed suddenly, as if nothing had happened. I was back on screen, standing near the middle of the corridor, frozen in place, staring toward the end of the hall. There was no figure. There was no shadow. There was only me. I called the supervisor over. He watched in silence, his expression unreadable. When the footage ended, he did not rewind it. He did not ask questions. He simply folded his arms and sighed. "You didn't see anything strange," he said flatly. "I did," I replied. "It was right there." He shook his head. The cameras don't lie. But his eyes betrayed him. He would not look at the screen. He would not look at me. Later that day, one of the older guards pulled me aside. His name was Samchai. His voice was low, careful, as if the walls themselves were listening. "The cameras don't record them," he said. "Them?" I asked. He hesitated. "Then, things that walk the corridor." I felt my stomach tighten. "Why?" I whispered. Samchai glanced toward the western wing before answering. "Because they don't exist the way we do. And because the moment you see one clearly enough." He stopped. "The corridor remembers you." That night, as I prepared for another shift, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. On the monitor labeled West Wing Corridor, a faint shadow stood at the far end of the hall. Perfectly still. The timestamp read 6:02 p.m. And no one was scheduled to be there. Chapter 4. The warning from the ones who stayed silent. That evening, before my shift began, Samchai stopped me near the locker room. He did not say my name. He did not greet me. He simply stood there, blocking my way, his hand resting lightly on the metal door as if he needed something solid to hold onto. Up close, I noticed how old he really looked, deep lines carved into his face. Eyes permanently shadowed, like someone who had spent too many nights staring into places that stared back. "You saw it clearly last night," he said. It was not a question. I nodded. Somchai closed his eyes for a brief moment, then opened them again. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "That's bad." I laughed weakly, hoping to drain some of the fear out of the air. "I didn't touch anything. I didn't go near it." "That doesn't matter," he replied. "Seeing is enough." He motioned for me to follow him. We walked down a side hallway, away from the cameras, away from the offices, to a spot where the ceiling lights were permanently broken. The darkness there felt thicker, like it pressed against the skin. "There are rules," Somchai said. "No one writes them down. No one explains them during training. But if you work here long enough, you learn." I waited. "Rule 1, he continued, "never call out to it first." My chest tightened. I already did. He nodded slowly, as if he had expected that answer. "Most people do." "Rule 2, he said, "never shine your light directly at its face." I couldn't see its face. I said. Somchai looked at me then, really looked at me, and shook his head. "That's not what I meant." He stepped closer. I could smell cigarettes and something else beneath it. Something stale and old. "And rule 3, he said, his voice dropping even lower, "never let it know that you recognize it as a person." I frowned. "It looks like a person." "It wants to," he replied. "That doesn't mean it is." I asked him what would happen if someone broke all the rules. Somchai was quiet for a long time. "Then the corridor changes," he said finally. "It gets longer. The lights last a little less. And the distance between you and it." He paused. "Gets shorter." I felt a chill creep up my spine. "Has anyone ever?" "Yes," he interrupted. "Plenty." I wanted names, proof, something concrete, but Somchai only gestured vaguely toward the western wing. "Some quit," he said, "some transfer, and some." He stopped himself, swallowing hard. "Some just stopped showing up." That night, as I walked toward the western wing again, his words echoed in my head. The corridor lights flickered on, one by one. I counted my steps without meaning to. 47. Exactly the same as the first night. Relief washed over me, brief and foolish. Then, at the very end of the hall, the light dimmed slightly. And I realized something with sudden, horrible clarity. The corridor hadn't changed yet. It was waiting.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 5. When the corridor grew longer, I started counting without meaning to. It wasn't a decision, it was instinct, the same way your body pulls back before your mind understands why. 47 steps. That was the number burned into my head from the first night. 47 from the entrance of the western wing to the far wall where the corridor ended. I needed it to stay 47. My boots struck the tiles, the sound sharp and hollow in the stillness. 1, 2, 3. The lights above me flickered, but did not go out. I focused on the floor, on the cracks between tiles, on anything that felt solid and measurable. 38, 39, 40. I slowed down. 41, 42, 43. I lifted my head. The end of the corridor felt farther away than it should have been. Not by much, just enough to make my stomach tighten. The walls seemed to stretch, their peeling paint forming patterns that no longer felt familiar. 44, 45, 46. I stopped. The far wall was still several steps away. My breath caught in my throat. 47. Nothing happened. I stood there, frozen, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The corridor did not end. It simply continued, smooth and uninterrupted, as if it had always been that way. I took another step. 48. Another. 49. By the time I reached the end of the hall, my count had reached 62. 62 steps. I turned around slowly, afraid that the entrance behind me might be gone, replaced by another stretch of endless hallway. But it was still there, distant and dim, framed by flickering light. That was when I noticed the figure. It stood along the wall this time, not at the very end, close enough that I could make out its outline more clearly. Too clearly. Its feet did not quite touch the floor. They hovered just above the tiles, casting no shadow of their own. The shape of its legs bent at an angle that made my knees ache just looking at them. It had moved. Not while I was watching. While I was counting. A cold realization settled into my chest. The corridor had not grown longer on its own. It had made room for something else. I did not shine my flashlight. I did not speak. I remembered Samchai's rules and clung to them like a lifeline. I walked past the figure without looking directly at it, my eyes fixed on the floor, my steps measured and deliberate. As I passed, the air changed. It grew colder, heavy with the scent of dampness and something metallic, like old blood soaked into stone. I felt pressure against my side, not a touch, but the awareness of something standing far too close. Behind me, something shifted. Not footsteps. A dragging sound. Slow. Wet. And for the first time since I started this job, I understood with terrifying certainty. The corridor was no longer just a place. It was a process. And I had already stepped too far inside it. Chapter 6. The sound that followed me. I did not turn around. Every instinct screamed at me to look, to confirm what my ears were telling me. But fear held my neck rigid, my eyes fixed forward. The corridor stretched ahead, its lights humming faintly, unaware, or pretending to be unaware, of what moved within it. The sound came again. A slow, uneven scrape against the floor. Not footsteps. Not quite. It was the sound of something being dragged, skin or fabric brushing against tile, leaving behind a faint, wet echo that lingered too long in the air. Each movement ended with a soft, hollow pause, as if whatever followed me needed time to gather itself before moving again. I walked faster. The sound followed. Still behind me. Still out of sight. My breathing grew shallow, loud in my own ears. I tried to control it, afraid that the sound of my fear might somehow guide it closer. The corridor lights flickered overhead, casting brief flashes of shadow along the walls, shadows that twitched and bent at angles that made no sense. I focused on the rules. Don't call out. Don't shine the light. Don't acknowledge it. Step by step, I moved forward, counting again without realizing it. 1, 2, 3. The dragging sound stopped. The silence that replaced it was worse. It felt deliberate, like a held breath. I took another step. The sound resumed, closer now. Not by much. Just enough. Cold spread along my spine, seeping through my uniform, settling deep in my bones. The smell returned, stronger this time. Damp concrete mixed with something coppery. Something old. It reminded me of hospital rooms after emergency surgery, when the floor was clean but the air never quite was. I became aware of a pressure near my right shoulder. No touch. Just the certainty that something occupied the space beside me. I kept my eyes forward, but the corner of my vision betrayed me. A shape moved there, dark and elongated, matching my pace with unsettling precision. Whenever I tried to focus on it, it slipped away, dissolving back into shadow. My radio crackled softly. Not static. Breathing. Slow. Labored. Wrong. I fumbled with the radio, fingers numb, and shut it off entirely. The corridor seemed to react to that, the lights dimming as if disappointed. The dragging sound stopped again. This time, I knew why. It wasn't behind me anymore. It was walking with me. Matching my steps, perfectly out of sync, close enough that I felt the air shift with its movement. Every muscle in my body screamed not to look, not to confirm what my mind was already building in horrible detail. I reached the end of the corridor and stepped into the small open space near the stairwell. The sound did not follow. When I finally dared to glance back, the hallway was empty. No figure. No shadow. No sign of movement. Only faint streaks on the floor. Long. Uneven. As if something had been dragged there many times before.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 7. Room number 7. The door was not supposed to open. That was the first thought that crossed my mind when I saw it. Room 7 sat halfway down the western corridor, its metal door secured with a thick padlock and a strip of yellow warning tape that had long since faded into a dull gray. I had passed it every night without incident. I knew its shape, the rust around the hinges, the small rectangular window reinforced with wire mesh. That night, the padlock hung loose. The door stood ajar, open just enough for darkness to spill into the corridor like a slow-moving stain. I stopped several steps away. The air around the doorway felt colder, heavier, carrying a smell that did not belong to dust or abandonment. It was sharp and sour, like sweat that had soaked into fabric and never been washed out. I raised my flashlight, then remembered the rules. Slowly, I angled the beam downward, letting it skim the floor instead of pointing directly inside. The light revealed scratches. Deep ones. They ran from the doorway inward, uneven and frantic, gouged into the tiles as if someone had dragged themselves across the floor using only their hands. The marks overlapped, layered over one another, telling the story of repeated attempts rather than a single moment of panic. I took a step closer. The beam caught the inside wall. The scratches continued there too, long, vertical lines carved into the paint, some deep enough to expose concrete beneath. They climbed the wall at strange angles, too high for someone standing normally, as if whoever made them had been pulling themselves upright again and again, only to slip and fall back down. My chest tightened. There was no bed inside the room, no medical equipment, no sign that it had ever been used properly as a hospital room at all. Only bare walls. And in the far corner, something darker than the surrounding shadows. I hesitated, then shifted the flashlight just enough to see it clearly. Writing. Crude, uneven letters scratched directly into the wall, darkened with something that might once have been blood. The message was short. Simple. Do not let it know you can see it. I stepped back instinctively, my heel catching on one of the floor tiles. The sound echoed far louder than it should have. Behind me, the corridor lights flickered. Once. Twice. I turned, heart racing, expecting to see the figure standing there, closer than ever. The corridor was empty, but the silence felt wrong. Pressurized. As if the building itself were listening. When I looked back at room 7, the door was closing. Not slamming shut. Not moving quickly. Just drifting inward, inch by inch, as if guided by an unseen hand that did not need to hurry. I did not wait to see it finish. I walked away, every step measured, resisting the urge to run. Behind me, the sound of metal touching metal echoed softly. The door had closed. And I knew, without knowing how, that whatever had left those marks had never truly left the room. It had only learned how to walk the corridor. Chapter 8. The incident that was never recorded. I did not plan to look into the hospital's past. That was the lie I told myself. The truth was simpler. After room 7, I could no longer pretend that what I was experiencing belonged only to the night. Whatever lived in the western corridor had a history, and I could feel it pressing closer, as if daring me to uncover it. The records room was in the basement. Most of the cabinets were empty, their contents transferred years ago to digital archives. But some drawers had been forgotten, or deliberately ignored. Dust coated their handles so thickly that my fingers left cleared trails when I touched them. I found the year by accident. A thin folder, yellowed and brittle, slipped out from between two larger files. There was no label on the spine, no department stamp, just a date written in faded blue ink. Inside were only 3 pages. The first was a patient intake form. Female, mid-30s, severe fracture to the right leg, complications following surgery, prolonged recovery. Room assignment. West Wing, room 7. The second page was a nursing report. Most of it was blank. The few lines that had been filled in were written hastily. The handwriting uneven. Patient complains of hearing footsteps in the corridor at night. Patient claims someone is standing outside her door. No one observed on camera. The third page was not an official document. It was a single sheet of lined paper, torn from a notebook, folded so many times it felt soft as cloth. The writing was cramped, frantic, Words pressed tightly together as if the writer had been afraid of running out of space or time. She keeps seeing someone in the hall. We don't see anything. Cameras show nothing. Patient became agitated after midnight. Leg condition worsened, dragging herself when pain increased. The report ended abruptly. No signature. No conclusion. No death certificate. I searched the system for follow-up records. There were none. No transfer. No discharge. No official death listed under her name. It was as if the patient had simply stopped existing. Later that night, I asked another guard why the western corridor had never been renovated. He shrugged. They tried. Why didn't they finish? He hesitated. Then, workers refused to go in after dark. That answer stayed with me. Because I knew now what they would have heard. The dragging sound. The slow movement. The patience of something that had learned how long it takes for a person to break. As I returned to my post, I felt it again, the subtle shift in the air, the sensation of being measured, evaluated. I understood then that the figure was not wandering the corridor. It was repeating something, reliving the only path it had ever known. And every night, it was getting closer to the end.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 9. When it turned to face me, I told myself I would not look. That was the promise I repeated in my head as I stepped into the western corridor that night. The rules were clear. The warnings were clear. Everything inside me knew that whatever waited there thrived on recognition. And yet, the moment I entered, I knew it was already too late. The corridor lights were dimmer than usual, casting long, uneven shadows that clung to the walls like stains. I counted my steps again, out of habit, out of desperation, but the numbers slipped through my thoughts without meaning. Distance had stopped behaving the way it should. The figure stood ahead of me, closer than ever before. Not at the end of the corridor. Not along the wall. It stood directly in the center, blocking the path forward as if it had finally decided that waiting was no longer necessary. I stopped. The air between us felt tight, compressed, humming with a low pressure that made my ears ache. The smell was stronger now, damp, metallic, unmistakably human, old blood, old pain. Its body was clearer than it had been before, its outline more defined, as though the darkness itself had learned how to shape it properly. I could see the bend of its spine, the unnatural angle of its right leg, twisted as if it had never healed correctly. It was facing away from me. I should have turned around. I should have left. But something in me wanted confirmation. A final answer to the question that had been growing louder with every night. Was it truly looking at me? Or was I only imagining that it was? The figure moved. Slowly. Deliberately. Its head began to turn. I felt my chest tighten, my breath locking in place as if my body already understood what my mind refused to accept. The corridor lights flickered wildly, shadows jerking along the walls in broken, frantic patterns. I squeezed my eyes shut. But the moment stretched on. And in that silence, I realized something terrible. It had stopped turning. It was waiting. Waiting for me to open my eyes. Against every instinct, against every warning, I looked. There was no face. No eyes. No mouth. No features that belonged to anything living. Where its face should have been was a hollow darkness, deeper than shadow, as if someone had carved a hole into the shape of a person and forgotten to fill it in. The edges of that emptiness pulsed faintly, like something breathing behind a thin veil. And yet, I knew, with horrifying certainty, that it was looking directly at me. Not seeing my body. Seeing me. The corridor seemed to tilt, the walls stretching inward, narrowing the space between us. My legs trembled, barely holding my weight, every thought scattered except one, cold and absolute. It knew. I had broken the last rule. The figure took a step forward. Not dragging. Not scraping. A clean, deliberate step. And in that moment, I understood the truth hidden beneath all the warnings. It had never needed to chase anyone. It only needed them to look back. Chapter 10. The corridor that refused to end. I ran. Not because I thought I could escape, but because standing still felt like surrender. My boots struck the tiles hard. The sound of my footsteps shattering the silence as I turned and sprinted back the way I had come. The corridor stretched ahead of me, lights flickering wildly, walls trembling as if the building itself were struggling to remain intact. I did not look back. I didn't need to. I could feel it behind me, not through sound, not through breath, but through a pressure in the air, like something vast moving just outside the limits of my senses. I reached the point where the corridor should have opened into the stairwell. It wasn't there. Instead, the hallway continued, perfectly seamless, perfectly identical to the one I had just run through. Same cracked tiles, same flickering lights, same stains on the walls, arranged in the same familiar, horrible patterns. I slowed to a stop, chest burning. "No," I whispered. I turned around. The corridor behind me was also endless. And at both ends, far in the distance where the light thinned into shadow, figures stood. Not one. Many. They lined the corridor like silhouettes cut from darkness, some tall, some bent, some unnaturally thin. A few dragged one leg behind them. Others stood perfectly still, their outlines trembling as if they were struggling to hold their shape. Every single one of them was facing me. I staggered backward, my heel catching on a cracked tile, nearly falling. The air felt thick, heavy, making every breath an effort. My radio crackled to life at my waist. Voices poured out. Not shouting, not screaming, whispering, layered over one another, overlapping, speaking in tones so familiar it made my stomach twist. I heard my own voice among them, heard Samchai's, heard voices I didn't recognize but somehow knew belonged to people who had once walked this corridor wearing the same uniform I wore now. "Don't run. Stay. It's easier if you stop." The figures began to move. Not toward me. Toward the center. Toward the space I occupied. The corridor narrowed, walls inching closer with a soft, grinding sound, as if the building were gently folding itself inward. The lights above burst one by one, plunging sections of the hall into darkness. I dropped to my knees, hands pressed against the cold floor. This was not a place anymore. It was a boundary. And I had crossed it the moment I looked back. In the distance, one figure stepped forward, closer than the rest. Its shape was clearer, more complete, as if it had spent longer here, learning how to exist. I recognized the way it stood. The tilt of its shoulders. The slight stiffness in its gait. It was me. Or something that was learning how to be. And as it took another step forward, the whispers stopped all at once. The silence that followed was absolute. Expectant.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 11. What the other figures were. I understood before anyone explained it to me. That was the cruelest part. The figure that stood closest, the one that wore my posture. My hesitation, my fear, did not move like a predator. It moved like a reflection struggling to separate itself from the glass. The others remained where they were, lining the corridor in patient silence. None of them advanced, none of them retreated, they simply existed, suspended in the dim light as if waiting for their turn to be remembered. A voice spoke. Not from the radio. Not from the walls. From inside my head. This is where they stay. Images flooded my mind, brief, fragmented, painfully vivid. A guard collapsing from exhaustion, staring too long into the darkness. A nurse working overtime, glancing down the corridor and recognizing something she shouldn't have. A maintenance worker following the sound of dragging feet, convinced someone needed help. Each moment ended the same way. Eye contact. Recognition. Understanding. And then, division. The corridor did not take bodies. It took imprints. When someone truly saw the figure, when they acknowledged it as real. As present, the corridor learned them, studied them, remembered how they stood, how they breathed, how fear changed the shape of their silhouette. And it made space. Not by removing the person, but by copying them. The original always left. Shaken. Traumatized. Alive. But something stayed behind. A shadow that was not quite a ghost and not quite a memory. A residue shaped by attention and terror. Repeating the last moment of recognition again and again. Night after night. That was why some people quit. That was why others transferred. And that was why a few names faded quietly out of records. They weren't missing. They were incomplete. The figure that looked like me stepped closer. I felt a strange pull in my chest, like standing too near the edge of a high place. The longer I stared at it, the harder it became to remember which side of the corridor I belonged to. The voice returned. "You can leave, everyone can. But you will not leave alone." I shook my head, backing away, but the walls offered no comfort. The space behind me felt thin, fragile, as if it might tear if I leaned on it too hard. "What do you want?" I whispered. The figure tilted its head. Not in curiosity. In expectation. "Just time," the voice replied. "Just attention. That is how we stay whole." I realized then that the corridor was never meant to be escaped permanently. It was meant to be fed. And the moment someone walked away believing they had survived, a version of them remained, standing patiently in the dark, waiting for the next pair of eyes to meet theirs. The figure raised its hand, mirroring my own. And I knew the choice in front of me was not whether I would leave. It was what would be left behind when I did. Chapter 12. When my voice called my name. It started softly. So softly that at first, I thought it was memory, my mind replaying a sound out of habit. The way it sometimes does when you are exhausted. A whisper, barely there, carried along the corridor like breath against glass. My name. Spoken in my voice. Not shouted. Not strained. Calm, familiar. I pressed my palms against my ears. But the sound did not fade. It wasn't entering through them. It was forming somewhere deeper. Vibrating through bone and thought alike. "Come back." The figure in front of me did not move its mouth. It didn't need to. The voice continued, perfectly steady, carrying the subtle rhythms I recognized as my own, the slight pause before certain words. The faint hesitation I never noticed until I heard it used against me. "You're tired," it said. "You don't have to fight anymore." Images bled into my vision. Not hallucinations, but memories, moments from my life stripped of context and replayed out of order. Sitting alone during night shifts, staring down long hallways, wondering, quietly, whether anyone would notice if I simply stopped showing up. The corridor listened. I felt it respond, the walls humming faintly, the floor pulsing beneath my knees. The space between me and the figure thinned, stretched tight like a membrane ready to tear. "I can take your place," the voice said gently. "I already know how." The figure raised its head. For the briefest moment, its featureless face rippled, as if something beneath the darkness were trying to surface, trying to organize itself into something more complete. Into me. Panic surged, sharp and sudden. I forced my eyes away, focusing on my hands, on the lines of my palms, on the proof that I was still anchored to a body that existed outside this place. "No," I whispered, "you're not me." The corridor reacted. The lights dimmed further. The other figures along the hall leaned inward, their silhouettes bending, attention sharpening. The pressure in my chest intensified, making it hard to breathe. The voice softened. "That's what they all say." I understood then that this was the final stage, not capture. Not possession, but consent. The corridor did not steal people. It waited for them to give up the effort of being whole. To accept division as relief. The figure stepped closer. I felt a strange pull. Not forward, but inward, as if something inside me were loosening, preparing to step out and leave the rest behind. If I listened, if I answered, my name echoed again, closer now, layered with other voices, other versions, all speaking in tones that once belonged to someone else. I clenched my fists, nails biting into skin, grounding myself in pain. "I hear you," I said, forcing the words out, "but I'm not staying." The figure froze. The corridor shuddered. For the first time since I entered it, something like uncertainty rippled through the space around me. And I realized, too late, perhaps, that refusing the voice was only part of the test. The corridor did not need me to stay. It needed me to leave something behind.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 13. The Final Measure. The corridor offered me a choice. It did not speak it aloud. It didn't have to. I felt it settle into place around me, the pressure easing just enough to make space for thought. The figures along the walls stopped leaning inward. The lights stabilized, their flicker slowing to a steady, exhausted hum. The figure that wore my shape stepped aside. Behind it, the corridor opened into something I had not seen before, a narrow section where the walls were lined with doors. Each one identical, each one closed. I knew what they were before I reached them. Memories. Not images, not dreams. Pieces. I touched the first door. It opened silently, revealing a moment from my childhood, standing in a school hallway after everyone else had gone home. Lights buzzing overhead, the strange comfort of being unseen. The second door held my first night shift. The third, the quiet relief of being alone when no one expected anything from me. I understood then. The corridor did not want fear. It wanted familiarity. It fed on the parts of people that already leaned toward isolation, toward silence, toward long empty spaces. The more a person belonged to the night, the easier it was for the corridor to learn them. The voice returned, not coaxing this time, but neutral. "You may leave," it said, "but you will not remember everything." My stomach tightened. The figure gestured toward the doors. Some glowed faintly, others remained dark. "Leave enough behind," the voice continued, "and you will pass through untouched. Leave too little," it added, "and we will complete what has already begun." I thought of Samchai, of his tired eyes, of how his name did not exist on any list. He had never vanished. He had paid. I opened another door. Inside was my name, written in my handwriting, over and over, filling the walls until it blurred into something unreadable. A reminder of how close I had come to letting the corridor define me completely. My hands trembled. I began to choose. Not the biggest memories. Not the ones that made me me. But the quiet ones. The comfort of empty hallways. The sense of belonging in places no one else wanted. The part of me that didn't mind being forgotten. One by one, the doors closed behind me. The corridor seemed to relax, satisfied, as if it had been paid a fair price. When I turned back, the figure that looked like me was fading, not disappearing, but losing clarity, its outline softening, details slipping away. Disappointed, but fed. At the far end of the hall, a door appeared that I had never seen before. Not marked, not locked, just waiting. As I stepped toward it, I felt something essential slipping quietly out of reach, not pain. Not loss, but a dull absence where certainty used to be. I would leave. I would survive. But I would never again feel fully comfortable in empty places. And that, I realized, was the corridor's final measure. Chapter 14. The morning that let me go. Morning arrived too easily. That was the first thing that felt wrong. I opened my eyes to pale daylight and the distant sound of traffic. The ordinary rhythm of a city waking up. For a few seconds, I lay still, waiting for the weight of the corridor to press down on me again, for the hum of flickering lights, for the sense of being watched. Nothing came. I was lying on the concrete steps outside the hospital's main entrance. My jacket folded awkwardly beneath my head. My watch read 6:18 a.m. The end of my shift had passed without ceremony. People walked by without looking at me. No one asked why a night guard was sleeping on the steps of a closed hospital. No one seemed to find it strange that my uniform was damp with sweat and dust, or that my hands were shaking when I finally pushed myself upright. I stood slowly, testing my balance. The building behind me looked inert, empty, just another abandoned structure losing a quiet battle with time. Sunlight reflected off its windows, revealing nothing but cracked glass and peeling paint. I told myself it was over. Inside the security office, everything appeared normal. The monitors displayed their usual feeds. The western corridor camera showed an empty hallway, evenly lit, exactly as it should have been. Exactly. I watched it for a long time. Something tugged at the edge of my thoughts, a sense of expectation that never resolved into memory. Like reaching for a word you know you once knew, only to find nothing there. I checked the personnel log. Samchai's name was gone. Not crossed out. Not marked inactive. Gone as if it had never been written there at all. I searched old rosters, shift schedules, incident reports. Nothing. When I asked another guard about him, the man frowned politely. "There's never been anyone here by that name," he said. "Are you sure you're not thinking of someone else?" I nodded and dropped the subject. What else could I do? As I packed my things, I noticed a gap in my thoughts, small, but unmistakable. I could remember the fear, the running, the voices. But the comfort I once felt in empty places was missing. The silence no longer felt neutral. It felt alert. Before leaving, I walked to the edge of the western wing one last time. I did not step inside. I stood at the threshold, letting the daylight spill only partway down the corridor. It remained empty. And yet, as I turned away, I felt a strange certainty settle over me, calm, distant, unshakable. I had been allowed to leave. That did not mean I had been forgiven. Behind me, unseen, the corridor continued its patient routine. Waiting.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 15. The Shadow That Stayed. I did not return to the hospital on purpose. Years passed. I changed jobs, moved apartments, learned how to sleep with the lights off again. Most days, I could almost believe that the western corridor had become nothing more than a bad memory, something shaped by exhaustion and fear. Exaggerated by time. Almost. Then one evening, on my way home from work, a storm forced me to take a detour. The road was unfamiliar, poorly lit, and narrowed the farther I drove. When the rain slowed and I finally looked up, I recognized the silhouette immediately. The hospital. It looked smaller than I remembered, less imposing, just another abandoned building swallowed by the city's sprawl. I told myself that recognition didn't mean obligation. I would not go inside. I parked anyway. I don't know why. The front steps were cracked, weeds pushing through concrete that had given up resisting. The main doors were locked, rusted shut. I stood there for a moment, listening to the rain, letting the sound ground me in the present. Then I noticed the lights. Deep inside the building, far past where electricity should have still worked, a single fluorescent light flickered on. In the western wing. I didn't enter. I swear I didn't. I stood at the threshold, exactly as I had years before, letting the faint glow stretch down the corridor without crossing into it. The hallway looked unchanged, same length, same walls, same tired hum of light struggling to stay alive. At the far end, something stood. Not fully formed. Not reaching out. Just a shadow. Incomplete, like a thought that never finished becoming a person. It didn't move closer. It didn't need to. I knew then what I had left behind. Not a memory. Not a copy. But a habit. The part of me that once felt at ease in empty places. The part that listened for echoes instead of voices. The part that understood how loneliness could feel like belonging if you stayed in it long enough. The shadow shifted slightly. Not in greeting. In recognition. I stepped back. The light flickered once, twice, then went out. The corridor returned to darkness. I left without looking again. Now, when I pass long hallways late at night, subway tunnels, office buildings, hospitals, I feel it sometimes. A pause, a hesitation, a sense that if I stop too long, if I look too carefully, something familiar might look back. I never do. Because I know this now. The corridor does not follow you home. It does not chase. It waits. In places where people walk alone. In moments when silence feels inviting. And sometimes, when the lights flicker just right. The shadow at the end of the hall is not trying to come closer. It is only checking whether you still remember how to leave part of yourself behind. Not everyone who leaves that hallway takes all of themselves with them. Some things are left behind in the dark. And they know how to wait. So if one night, you find yourself in a hallway that's too long, too quiet, don't stop. And don't look toward the end. Because maybe that figure is waiting for you to remember who you are.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.